We're joined in the studio now by a trio of criminal defense attorneys, Joseph Hayden, Henry Klingeman, and Anthony Iacullo. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. Surprised?
I am. I'm surprised that it's convictions as to each and every count. Based upon the emails that were exchanged, I did believe that there would be convictions as to each defendant, but I did not believe that it would be all 9 convictions as to each one.
Henry?
I can't say I'm surprised. This case was never about what happened. It was about why it happened. And the defendants conceded in the face of the overwhelming evidence that they participated in the Bridge Lane closures. The real question is why. Were they motivated by political retaliation against the Fort Lee mayor, or were they motivated by a desire to conduct a legitimate traffic study? And the jury made its decision.
And Joe, how obvious was this that this was not a real traffic study?
Well, the evidence was fairly clear it was not a real traffic study. The question was whether each defendant knew that it wasn't a traffic study or whether or not they were misled. What you really had here, Michael, was competing narratives. You had a narrative from the prosecution which was it was obstruction, it was retaliation, and you both have circumstantial evidence and oral testimony. The narrative from the defense was we did not think it was retaliation, and by the way, we are scapegoats. We are being made the fall guy for powerful people in high places. The hope was that that narrative would strike a chord of fundamental fairness on the part of some of the jurors, and there might not be a conviction based on a kind of a jury nullification. The jury obviously accepted the government's narrative and not the defense narrative.
Did they ever cross that threshold, though, of trying to point the finger up and say somebody else ordered this?
Well, they crossed the threshold in the sense of, I believe Ms. Kelly's testimony was that the governor was aware of it, and the administration generically perhaps could have ordered it, but there was no specific testimony that I recall that named any individual.
What are the chances on appeal?
Oh, I think there are substantial legal issues. It will be argued from both sides. Either side can argue whether it's motive, whether it's the nature of the agreement. I think they've got a very decent chance on appeal, and a lot of it's going to depend upon what panel they draw in the Third Circuit.
Henry, your thoughts on what Mr. Fishman said? He said a lot there.
Well, he sounded somewhat defensive to me. The accusation has been that he did go after the low-hanging fruit, and he makes the compelling point that, in fact, he was prosecuting a deputy chief of staff and a deputy executive director. But at the same time, in the political world surrounding this case, Chris Christie is perceived as his ultimate target, and it doesn't sound like he'll ever pursue him on the basis of the evidence that's been brought forward.
There's virtually zero chance that the so-called unindicted co-conspirators list will ever come out.
Well, you know, I guess that's something that'll have to be determined by the U.S. attorney. I thought what was interesting was he did address the media very pointed and responsive to their questions. I do believe what Joe said is, and I think even in his analysis of what constitutes the conspiracy and the object of the conspiracy versus motive will be something hopefully the Third Circuit will take a look at, because I think there's a disagreement between the defense and the government as to those material elements.
He said several times over that motive doesn't count in a bank robbery, and yet he talked.
But he was talking about a bank robbery rather than a conspiracy. It was very easy to be glib when it says motive doesn't count in a bank robbery, but here we're talking about a different crime. We're talking about the crime of conspiracy. That's a horse of a different color.
See, Joe, I think even if you use the example, and I agree with you, in a nutshell, if you and I agree that we have financial problems, and you say to me, Anthony, I'm going to rob a bank, and I say to you, Mary Alice, you know, you say to me, you're going to rob a gas station. You rob a gas station, I rob a bank. We don't have a conspiracy. Okay? We might have agreed that you're going to do something, I'm going to do something totally different. But in the example that was given, I believe, by the U.S. attorney, and I think that's why it's significant, that there has to be the objective. If we both agree we're going to rob the bank and we participate and we do rob the bank, then we do have a conspiracy. Even if we don't ultimately take the action to do that, it still may be a substantial step in the planning stage that we could be found guilty of conspiracy. But I think it's very different in this case because it's object as opposed to motive.
I'd be very surprised if the judge got this one wrong. I'm sorry, Michael.
Yes, I'm sorry. I want to thank our studio guest, Joe Hayden, Henry Klingerman, and Anthony Iacullo. Thank you very much.